Everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Super Friday event. My name is Melissa Rapp. I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions here at the Goizueta Business School. And we're going to get started in just a few people still entering the room. Just a minute. Okay. So when my daughter was high, she started to talk about basketball a lot, and she started watching a lot of basketball videos, and she declared basketball to be her absolute favorite sport. And then in 8th grade, she announced that she'd be going to play basketball and would be trying out for the team in 1 month. There's a couple of things you should know. First of all, up until that point, my daughter's exposure to basketball had been A, on YouTube, and B, in her PE class in grade school. Secondly, my daughter is tiny. At the time, probably 4'9" maybe, and maybe 75 pounds. She's itty bitty little. And third, she has a genetic condition called Williams syndrome. What that means is she's had some developmental delays. She has trouble focusing. She needs things explained a couple times. So I was a little hesitant about this. I'm going to play 8th grade basketball goal of hers. And you might remember junior high kids tend to be a tough crowd. So everything in my being told me this was not going to go well. But as a parent, sometimes you have to roll with it. And so on tryout day, Ellie rolled downstairs in her Chuck Taylors, her gym shorts, and a hoodie. And we drove over to the high school gym where tryouts were being held, and walked into a gym full of girls who I think had played since birth, all wearing Air Jordan and already starting drills that, compared to what Ellie's skills were, looked like the Harlem Globetrotters. So my horse sank, and Ellie just marched right in. So, to our surprise, she came home and announced that was the best day ever. And she made the team. She very excitedly attended practices. She rooted harder than anyone else from the bench, and she cried when her team lost. At the end of the year, she was nominated as a star player and leader of the team. It wasn't the points she scored, because there was only one of those, thank God for fouls and free. It wasn't her passes completed or court time, because that was about 15 minutes all in. It was her ability and enthusiasm for the team. It was her ability to build relationships one high five at a time. She never gave up, and she always showed up. And when we talk about preparing principled leaders to have a positive influence on business and society, sometimes I think about that basketball season, because that season I witnessed the importance of passion. Being passionate about what you do can carry you through hard times and challenges and make it so much easier to show up. And maybe each of you who have chosen to attend today have already found a career you're passionate about, or maybe you're still searching, but Goizueta is a place where you can enhance an existing passion or discover your passion. Our experiential curriculum is designed for this, and daily interactions with faculty who are deeply passionate about their subjects inspire our students year in and year out. During that season, I also witnessed leading without status. Ellie wasn't a coach. She wasn't a captain. She'd never even been a player up until this year. And not every graduate of Goizueta will be a CEO, but all graduates will have to lead like she did, sometimes from the bench, and lead no matter what your role is or what organization you are in and what circumstances you find yourself in. Finally, that season, I witnessed the power of positive influence. one of the harsh realities of parenting a child with some special needs is that many people view them as obstacles or someone who will hold the rest of the team back. During that season, I witnessed players and parents go from skeptical to accepting. And by taking a risk and following her passion, Ellie helped them make the world a little more tolerant and a little more accepting. As a newly minted MBA, you'll join an organization, and you may not be at the top of it in the beginning, but every interaction, project, and deliverable will be an opportunity for you to help shape the world. Small influences lead to big impact. Helping you to define and refine your passion, to take risks and to lead no matter what your role, is at the heart of what we do at Goizueta, at the heart of what could be your MBA journey. Each of you have the tremendous opportunity to impact the world, and our community of faculty and administrators, students and alumni are excited to have you be a part of our little world called Goizueta, to help you become a principled leader who will have a positive influence on business and society. So today we gather here for our Super Friday event to help introduce you to that community, to help you feel the passion that we have for helping you find your own passion. And we're going to start with one of our current full-time students, Karen Garolo. Karen's a University of Kentucky alum and has had various roles in the hospitality industry. And immediately prior to business school, she was the director of public events for Roaming Hunger, the leading provider of turnkey food truck catering, concessions, and branded promotions. So Karen, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm really excited to be talking to you all about my experience prior to and during my tenure here at Goizueta Business School. So as Melissa said, prior to this, I worked at a small startup in Los Angeles called Roaming Hunger. I was kind of a jack of all trades when I started, just doing anything that needed to be done, but was able to identify a potential revenue source. And eventually, after 3 months there, I was given the ability to create a department completely from scratch. So I basically built a company within a company there. I provided concession service to both Fortune 500 companies as well as small events for local communities, and really created a really awesome team that is still existing today despite the pandemic. It still exists, and some of those relationships that I built with companies like Tesla helped carry my previous company through this really hard time. So it was a really amazing experience, but I found myself looking for the next challenge. I really loved my job, but like some of you here, you probably love your jobs or love your company, but just know that you're ready for the next part of your life and part of your career. So I wanted to take a moment and consider other industries and really decide what I wanted to do next. So that brought me here to Goizueta. As far as my time during school right now, I had a sweet conversation with my mom over the holidays. I asked her, so Mom, you know, when I was little and people would say to you, well, what do you think Karen's going to be when she grows up? I said, is it holding true, your answer after all these years? And she said, you know what, Karen, I just told everyone you would be a leader. And that has followed through in my life. I have always looked for leadership opportunities and you know, wanted to be there. I have wanted to make an impact on the organization that I'm in, but also ensure that my fellow students or fellow employees are having the best experience possible. So when you come to Goizueta here, there will immediately be leadership opportunities for you to get involved in. One of the biggest ones is to be the section rep. Your first core semester, your class will be divided into 3 different sections. And so myself, along with my friend Phil, who could not be here, but my friend Phil and I were both section reps for section C, which I hope you get into because it's the best one. That involved weekly meetings with our program office, talking to the different students within our section, finding out what was working and maybe what wasn't working, which you can imagine, given the past semester we have had, was very, very important, with half of our class being on a computer and half of our class being able to be in the actual classroom. That was, I don't know how much you guys know, but your core semester is pretty intense. You have a lot of classes. You're also going through recruiting, going to company presentations, figuring out what you might want to do for your internship or after business school. So it was a big responsibility and a time commitment, but it was really the support of my fellow classmates, the support of the program office, that allowed us to do these, to have this role. You also, once you're here, have a core group that you are with through the entirety of the first semester. And I was extremely blessed. I had the best core group. We are still such good friends, and really carried each other through not only the first semester, but also through the pandemic, and feeling a little isolated at times because we weren't able to all be together. So we would get on a Zoom and play games online to ease up what was happening in the semester and in the world. And it was an amazing experience. I can't wait to see them all in person, hopefully soon. And then I also ran for the vice president of the ambassador program. So all of the lovely students that you all will get to talk to prior to your application or after you apply and are an admitted student. You may have some students reaching out to you. Those are all ambassadors. So I am with an amazing 4 students, but Phil is also another one of those VPs. So we're just kind of bound together during our experience here. But that's been amazing as well, planning these events for you all, letting you an inside look at what it's like to be at Goizueta, but also to see what an amazing opportunity this is. I'm sure that you are all, you know, not putting all your eggs in one basket, as my mom would say, and making the right decision of the school to go to is very important. But feel free to reach out to me or any one of us to tell you why we chose Goizueta and why it has been such an amazing opportunity for us. And we're, you know, everyone I know is super happy. So there you go. But in terms of when you are here, there are tons of opportunities for leadership. Excuse my puppy, she's gonna start talking to you. We have leadership coaching fellows through Delta that are here. We also have something really cool for second years. If you do the 2-year program called GALA, that's the Advanced Leadership Academy. You get to sail a boat down in the Caribbean seas. I'm super excited about it. There are clubs, both professional, affiliate, and social. We have an activities board that will plan all of our social activities. You have professional clubs like marketing, consulting, there's general management, and there's affiliate clubs like the Women's Club. I'm part of that. You know, we have an LGBTQA club. We have a partners club. If you have a spouse, I have a spouse, he's a member of that club. We also have service or clubs like Goizueta Business Association. We have a president of the class, vice president, the Graduate Student Government Association within all of Emory, and section rep and ambassadors, like I said. And then there's also other initiatives. Throughout this process, you might get to know someone named Nikki. She's amazing. She's in my class. She ran a whole voter registration drive at our school, and it was amazing and important. And then other social initiatives, you really have the freedom and the support to create a club if needed. Over the summer with the Black Lives Matter movement, 2 of our students approached the program office to make an affiliates group to provide support and have students get together of how we can better serve our community at Goizueta. So when you are here, you really have to think about what are your priorities. Do you want to be on the dean's list? Do you want to graduate with honors? Or is just getting a job the main thing and you're going to spend most of your time recruiting and talking to companies and networking? Or are you just wanting to engage with your cohort and make as many friends as possible? All of those are great options. You know, we want to see you make good grades and get good jobs, but the world is your oyster. And then you also can't forget about your family and your internships and your mental health. You know, especially for our class, mental health was so important, and being able to reach out to each other. Our chats would go crazy. in GroupMe or in Slack. Some of us use Slack, some of us use Teams. We really tried to provide as much support as possible for each other as we navigated through this environment and really adapted, to what was happening in the world. So think for you, what do you want to do? How do you want to make an impact during your time at Goizueta and after? I know I have accomplished a lot I have set out to do when I joined this program, but there's much more. And I know through the support of this program and through the support of my class that a lot is possible, and I'm very excited. So feel free to reach out to me. My email is really simple, karen.garola@emory.edu. Happy to answer any questions or connect you to any of our students that you would like to talk to.
Karen, thank you so much for sharing with everyone. Now, one of my favorite things, I have been at Goizueta now for about 18 months, and one of the favorite things that I've gotten to do is get to know a whole new set of faculty members. And among them is our professor who has joined us today, Klaus Box. He has been a leader in the alternative investment industry for many years. He serves as director or advisor for over 13 companies and investment funds with over 1.5 billion in assets. Prior to Emory, Dr. Box held positions at Fuji Bank in Tokyo, Deutsche Bank in Hong Kong, and the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. He's won numerous awards, including Emory's highest award for teaching excellence, the Emory Williams Distinguished Teaching Award. Klaus, thank you so much for being here.
I just realized my mute off right there. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Melissa. It's great to see you all, everybody here. Very excited to be here. I wanted to do a little bit of a session. We're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive here together with my friend and co-teacher, David Panton. But before we get started, let me just say that you guys are all making a great choice of here looking at Emory. I think it's a phenomenal program that we have here. I've been at many different schools in my career, and I think we stack up with the best of them. So congratulations for being here today and checking it out. I'm going to tell you a little bit what I do at Emory and what I'm passionate about. It's a microcosm of what Karen was just all referring to. She opened up so many different opportunities for you and different ways to think about what you're going to do here at Emory. And I'm sort of one of those puzzle pieces. So the thing that I teach at Emory is all related to alternative investments. And if you don't know what that is, think about private equity you might have heard about, or hedge funds, things that are sort of outside of stocks and bonds. But maybe more importantly, what I do at Emory, I'm very passionate about people thinking about ways to expand their careers in a non-corporate track. So think of it as being your own entrepreneur, and maybe you can buy your own business. And in fact, I teach a course on that together with the gentleman that I'm going to be hosting this session with, David Panton. But that's really what I'm passionate about. And I believe there are lots of tracks outside of corporate America. And even if you don't do that, it's a way to expand your mind and to see what other opportunities are there. How people, what may seem impossible, buy a business. And the class that I teach with David is a popular class at Emory, and we teach people how to buy a business. And many of you are here in the room may say like, well, I don't know how to do that. I've worked at Home Depot or Coca-Cola, and I've never really thought about how would I buy a business. That seems like so far from my bed. I don't know how to do that. And what we try to do in this class is take people who have never thought about that, and at the end of their time here at Goizueta, they own a business. That's what we try to do. It's one of the most exciting things, if not the most exciting thing I do in my life. It doesn't mean we have about 140 students in the class that every one of them is going to buy a business, but every year a handful of students makes that transition. And so we go from thinking about, for example, we had a student who worked at Home Depot in accounting from 9 to 5. And if you don't know what that means, then every day of your life, a little piece gets sucked out of you right there. You diminish every day a little bit. So he came to us and he said like, hey, I want to buy a business. I want to buy a business. I don't know how to do that. So apologies for all of those of you who work in accounting or work at Home Depot. They're great careers to have. I'm just being a little facetious here. So he said like, hey, I want to go and buy a business. And so long story short, when he started with our class, he had no idea how to do it. He said like, I'd heard from other students, it was a good class. And it transformed this way of thinking. And so he has come out of our class and he ended up owning 4 gas stations in Northern Florida. So he kind of became his own boss and kind of was able to transition out of that. He's super happy with that. Very different from what he did before. And that's truly a miraculous journey. And we try to do that for many students in my class, but I think even broader across the Goizueta journey, when you think about that, we try to help you think maybe in ways that you haven't thought about and broaden your perspectives in ways that you might never imagine before. And one of the best things, I've been to great schools in my careers, to Harvard, to Wharton. I spent time there.
Class, I think your audio has stopped. Because am I the only one who can't hear him?
No, I think his audio did stop.
Hold on. Let me
There it's back now, Klaus. It's back. Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me back?
Yes, you're back now.
Where did you lose me? Sorry about that. Where did you lose me?
It was a minute or two ago.
Oh, a minute or two ago. So what I wanted to say is, so what I teach at Emory, sorry if I cut out. Did I finish my story about the Home Depot student? I did.
Yes.
So he got a job and he ended up buying his own business. A very exciting story. And that's a microcosm sort of what I teach at Emory and what I'm passionate about and what I'd like my students to take away is like, hey, there are other possibilities than just, I need to make the next corporate ladder track. But that's just for me. I think in a broader sense, really what Goizueta is about is helping you think through a transformation of who you are as a person and the possibilities that are in front of you. And I think business schools can do a great job in that. Now, I've been to many business schools, great business schools. I spent time at Harvard, at Wharton, lots of great schools. And one of the awesome things about Emory is our close-knit small community. I think that is a huge advantage to think about how people can help you kind of make that transformation. And you need people around you to help you think through that and challenge you and support you in making that transition. And it's not always an easy one. And sometimes it's not immediately after school. So that's kind of what I share with my students and what I'm extremely passionate about. What I'm going to do for the next, I think we have about half an hour in total. What I want to do next is have a conversation with David Panton. He's a gentleman that I teach this class with called Entrepreneurial Private Equity, in which we help people think about kind of becoming their own boss through an acquisition by buying a company. David and I have been teaching this class for the last 10 years. So I'll ask him to give an introduction. Afterwards, we're going to have an open dialogue about something completely different, not necessarily buying a business, but about special purpose acquisition companies. People heard about that? SPACs? You can see some thumbs up on people. Some people heard about it. It's a lot in the news these days. Most IPOs today, initial public offerings today are SPACs. So there's a little bit of a dive into finance because that's my specialty and I'll share that with you today. But, there are lots of experts all around the school on different topics. So even if finance is not completely your area, hopefully you're going to learn something today about SPACs. But with that, I'll turn it over to David. David, maybe you can spend a few seconds on your own background. And I want to give a shout out to some of my students here in the class. If you want to ask more questions here, Evan Lyons is here. I see Evan, at least he's on video, maybe some more students. Go say hi to him if you're more interested in learning about acquiring your own company. He's on that journey with me. So great to see you, Evan. With that, I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks, Klaus. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Panton. I live in Atlanta. I will point out I just came back from lunch with my son, who is a sophomore at Emory. That was his top choice, so he was very excited to do that. And I've had the pleasure of teaching a course with Klaus called Entrepreneurial Private Equity, Perspectives from Practitioners for the past decade, which has been a real highlight of my life as well. I only teach one semester. I'm not a full-time professor. I'm an adjunct professor. I do have a day job in the private equity industry, but I very much enjoy every year meeting with and learning from, and in several cases working with and even investing with some of the students who have been in our class. So it's been a great pleasure. I'm from the deep South, as you can probably hear from my accent, south of Georgia, south of Florida, south of Cuba. I'm from Jamaica, born and raised. And at the very young age of 15, I applied to college in the States, which was probably a mistake, because a lot of 18-year-old girls don't like dating 15-year-old boys. But I went to Princeton for undergrad, and then I went after that to law school at Harvard. I'd always wanted to be a lawyer, until I got to law school. And then I realized that was a mistake. I actually did get my law degree, but I went on to get a business degree. I was fortunate. I got a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, ended up doing a PhD in business, and then went straight into investment banking. I read a great book about this industry called private equity, which I'd never heard of. And for those of you who are interested, the book I read, which is still a great book, I'd recommend it to anyone, is a book called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun by a guy named Reginald Lewis. And the subtitle is How Reginald Lewis Built a Billion-Dollar Business Empire. So it taught me a lot, and I said, I want to do what Reginald Lewis did. And that's pretty much what I've spent the rest of my career trying to do. So I worked at Morgan Stanley Investment Banking in New York. I then only did it for a year. I wanted to start my own firm. I went back to Jamaica, ran a private equity firm for 5 years, sold it, moved to Atlanta, Georgia in 2004. I joined what was then the largest private equity firm in Atlanta called Mellon Ventures. And long story short, 2 years later, I bought that firm and renamed it Navigation Capital Partners. And that's what we are today. That's our website, navigationcapital.com. We were backed by Goldman Sachs. They gave us just under $500 million to do it. Goldman Sachs is this small financial services firm based in New York, which some of you may have heard of. Gave us quite a bit of money. We've done about 40 transactions. And then a few years ago, we decided to get into the world of what Klaus referred to as SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies. I should point out that a few years ago, I started a family office as well to do investing on my own, which Klaus knows a lot about. And my brother runs that firm for me now. He actually sat in on the class. And after a few years of sitting in on the class, he said, David, I'm going to buy a firm. And that's exactly what he did. So even though he still works for me, he has his own business. So it's I think it's a great class for people who are entrepreneurial or people who may not be entrepreneurial, but who can be entrepreneurial. So what we do now is we invest in SPAC, special purpose acquisition companies, exclusively. Our very first SPAC, I asked Klaus if he would serve on the board. He kindly agreed. And he has become effectively a SPAC expert in this space. And so we spent a lot of time talking about SPACs, investing in SPACs. And just today, actually, I think it's public now. We just, our latest SPAC was just made public. We just announced it. It's underwritten by Goldman Sachs, and it is run by a CEO. Her name is Betty Liu. And here's a sad and somewhat tragic statistic. The New York Stock Exchange started in 1874, and thousands of companies have been listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Only 20 of the thousands were founded by and had a CEO who was a woman. And we are now the 21st. And in SPACs, we're the third. So we're very excited about that, about Betty's SPAC. So we are the sponsor of the SPAC. And a SPAC, as Klaus will tell you, is a special purpose acquisition company. It's just a publicly listed company that the only asset they have is cash. And we go out, and our objective is to go and find an operating company. So Betty left her job at the New York Stock Exchange as the executive vice chairman of the New York Stock Exchange to do this effort with us. So we're very excited about that.
Excellent. I hope my audio is back. Is it back?
You're back, Klaus.
Great. So yeah, so I wanted to share a little bit what SPACs are about. And the reason is that SPACs have been extremely popular over these last few years. And so I'll ask David a little bit, give us a little bit of context maybe. So both he and I have been working in SPACs. Let's give that background. And I'm actually the chairman of another SPAC, and hopefully we're going to do a deal soon, which has been very exciting. David, he didn't really share that, but today most of what he does is in and around the SPAC world. He runs $100 million, or we're in the process of raising $100 million strategy, and then on top of that, $1 billion strategy for sponsoring SPACs. So maybe let's start a little bit contextualize SPACs, David. Maybe in a few sentences, what are SPACs about, and then give a sense why they're relevant in the marketplace today. So,
sure. So SPACs were actually invented by, shockingly, an investment banker back in 1993. So they've been around for a little while. And it stands for special, that's the S, purpose. The A is acquisition, and the C is corporation. So it's a company which has a special purpose. And that special purpose is to acquire a company. It doesn't always acquire a company, could merge with a company. But effectively, it's an IPO, an initial public offering of an entity. As I mentioned earlier, that entity has only one asset, and that asset is cash. So money is raised. And why would anyone give someone just cash? They would give them cash because they're incentivized as investors by receiving not just a share, as in most, in fact, almost all IPOs, but also typically some sort of kicker or upside. And in most SPACs, that's in the form of a warrant. And so a SPAC is really a bet on the jockey. There is no horse yet. It's saying we like the management team, we like their strategy, we like the fact that we have sort of a kicker, and we're going to look and wait, typically a period of 2 years, for that jockey and that team to execute on their strategy and find a company to acquire or merge with. If at the end of that 2-year period, the jockey hasn't found a company, then the investors have a very unusual feature. They can get their money back, and they get to keep the warrants, which may or may not have some value at that point in time. And if they do find a company, the investor still has the option of saying, I'm not interested in the company, I still want my money back, or I like the company and I'm going to stay into that company. And that company could, become the straightway normal publicly traded companies. Several companies you may have heard of, you probably know, like Burger King was a SPAC, Hostess was a SPAC, Atkins was a SPAC. It's funny that Hostess and Atkins, it's sort of contradictory. We're both SPACs, but that's a different story. But we've had SPACs in the energy space, in the financial services space. Virgin Galactic, started by Richard Branson, whose business is singularly to do passenger travel to the moon. They literally have no revenues, but have a market capitalization of about $5 billion. Quite astonishing. But Richard Branson, very successful entrepreneur. That was a SPAC. So there have been quite a few SPACs. To bring a little bit of context in terms of numbers, in 2019, last year, there were just under $15 billion raised in SPACs, about 60 SPACs. So for the entire year, 60 companies listed on an exchange and raised around $15 billion. This year, in 2020, the $15 billion has gone to almost $80 billion for last year in 2020. So in 2019, 15 billion, 60 SPACs. In 2020, 15 billion went to 80, and the 60 SPACs went to 250. So there has been an explosion of SPACs in the world, but primarily on US exchanges. In fact, more SPACs were raised last year and more money was raised than in all of the years combined, going back to 1993. So last year was an incredible year for SPACs. There's some people who think it's going to end very badly. There are others like me who don't think it's going to end very badly, and that we're actually in the relatively early innings, but we'll find out soon enough.
Yeah, that's a great background, David. And just to even contextualize that more than half of all IPOs, people know what an IPO is, an initial public offering, where stock goes public, say on the NYSE or NASDAQ. More than half of all IPOs were SPACs. Okay, it's an incredibly important part of the market today, especially in that space. And most companies that want to go public seriously think about doing that through a SPAC structure to do that. So, David, why don't we talk a little bit about maybe an example of a SPAC? Maybe you can talk a little bit about Betty Liu and how she got into it, why companies should consider this, why it's good for them, and why it's good for sponsors. Why has it been so incredibly hot?
Sure. Actually, you know what? I'm going to give an example of something which, if anyone here knows sports, might be interested in. So let me start with that. So there are two gentlemen, one named Jeff Sagansky and another named Harry Sloan, who were both business people who worked at large companies. One worked at CBS and the other one worked for NGM in Florida, in California. So they were both entertainment executives. They retired. They're actually in their 70s now. You don't have to be old to do a SPAC. There are lots of younger people who've done SPACs. In fact, that Virgin Galactic SPAC was done by a guy named Chamath Palihapitiya, who used to work at Facebook, and he's a relatively young gentleman. But this example I'm going to give you of Harry and Jeff. So Harry and Jeff in 2019, May of 2019, they did an IPO of a SPAC, which was called Diamond Eagle Acquisition Corp. And all SPACs have the name Acquisition Corp at the end. So whenever you look at a public company, if they have the name Acquisition Corp at the end, it's a SPAC. And their ticker normally has a U, which stands for unit. So almost every single SPAC has whatever the ticker letters are, and then .U. So Diamond Eagle Acquisition Corp was DEAC .U for the units. They also had another ticker for the shares, DEAC, and they also had another ticker for the warrants, which is DEAC W. So they raised $400 million from investors, who are most of the investors in SPACs. Interestingly, most of the investors are hedge funds. And hedge funds like SPACs because they like that financial aspect, that there's no downside risk because you have a right to get your money back, but you have potential upside if they find a good company. And you also get to keep the warrants. So they went around to look for a company. So they hired an investment bank. The underwriters of the SPAC were Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank, two New York Wall Street investment banks. The large underwriters, investment banks in SPACs today are Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, Goldman Sachs. Those are the largest, and UBS. Those are the top 5 investment bank underwriters. In this case, Goldman and Deutsche underwrote Jeff and Harry's Diamond Eagle acquisition. They went around working with investment banks, leveraging their board of directors to find a good company. They did find a company called Draftkings. Anyone here heard of Draftkings? If you've heard of it, just raise your hand so I can see. Okay. So awesome. Draftkings is so we have a lot of gamblers maybe online.
I know. We have gamblers in the room right here. I like it.
Draftkings is an online sports betting site. And they had in 2018 and were projected in 2019 to have about 150 million of revenues, and they were losing money, still losing money, because they spent a lot of money on marketing. And so it was a little bit too small for what Jeff and Harry wanted to do. So they found another company, which is called SB Tech, which was a technology company that did the platform for gambling, for gaming, online gaming sites, and for casinos. And so they said, let's merge these two companies together. So they spoke to the owners of Draftkings. They spoke to the owners of SB Tech, and they said, let's put these companies together. And that's what they did under the Draftkings umbrella. And they announced their transaction in December of 2019. So it took them, they went public in May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 6, 7, 8 months. They then announced the transaction. Now, the owners of Draftkings and SB Tech, and SB Tech, it was one main individual, a guy named Shalom McKenzie, an Israeli entrepreneur, relatively young, 44, wasn't a big fan of SPACs, but he recognized that he could take his company public relatively quickly, much more quickly than a traditional IPO. He would get liquidity. He would not be locked up, I mean, he wouldn't be prevented from selling his shares. But he wanted some liquidity, and he said, I want $200 million. So they agreed to pay him $200 million. But he rolled most of his shares at a pretty attractive valuation. And one of the reasons he was persuaded to sell, as were the shareholders who were mostly institutional venture capital firms in Draftkings, is because unlike a traditional IPO, in a SPAC IPO, under the SEC rules, you can actually provide your financial projections. So you can say to the world, here are there for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years where we expect to go. You can't do that in a traditional IPO. So you can typically get a higher valuation. And that's exactly what they did. They valued both companies, which together had about 300 million in revenues, both losing money, but SB was losing less money than Draftkings. They valued both companies at $3 billion. So pretty high valuation, big multiple of revenues, no multiple of profitability or EBITDA or cash flow because both companies were losing money. They then went on a roadshow to investors and began persuading them this was a good company. And here's a statistic which a lot of people don't know, but it's good for you to know, especially if you're interested in business. The number of publicly traded companies in the United States has fallen in half over the past 25, 30 years. The peak number was in 1996 when there were just around 8,000 publicly traded companies in America. Today, that number is less than 4,000. So we have half as many companies, but over that same period of time, the amount of money going into public companies has quintupled. So from around 7 trillion today to 36, 37 trillion dollars, actually closer to 40 trillion dollars today. So more money chasing fewer deals. So a lot of the firms out there, the Wellingtons, the Fidelities, they want new products, new companies. And online sports betting, especially in a pandemic, very attractive. So in March of this year, in the peak of the pandemic, actually in April, which was the worst month for trading in the United States and for many other things, because that's when we had the biggest surge initially. In that month, when very few deals were closed, they closed the deal. And the stock price of Draftkings, all SPACs go public at $10 per share. The stock price doubled to $20. So if you were an investor in the IPO at $10, you would have gotten 2 times your money, but you would have gotten actually more than that because you got warrants. And those warrants also went up in value. So those warrants ended up being worth $6. So actually on a $10 investment, you ended up having $26 of value. So it worked out to a 2.5x return in pretty much 1 year. And a lot of that growth in SPACs this year happened after the Draftkings deal. A lot of people looked at that and said, hold on a second, even in a pandemic, we can still increase. So just to wrap that story up, what happened? Since that time, the stock price, if anyone here has Bloomberg, you can look at the price. I haven't checked it recently, but I think the valuation today is closer to $20 billion from $3 billion. One of the things they did in between, which was very smart, is if you think of sports, online sports, or just sports, and you think of betting, who's the one name that comes to mind who straddles both, it'd be Michael Jordan, certainly known for betting, certainly known for sports. And they made him an advisor to the company, and the stock price doubled. So the sponsors, Harry and Jeff, invested about $20 million and have made about $700 million in the past year and a half. The investors in the stock, if you had kept the stock from April to the present, have made 4 times your money. And if you would invest in the IPO, you've made 6 to 7 times your money. So it's been quite an attractive investment. And it demonstrates, and if you were the sellers of the stock, Shalom McKenzie, who thought his company was worth $1 billion, today he is the largest shareholder of Draftkings. If anyone asks you who owns Draftkings, the largest shareholder, Shalom McKenzie. His stake today is worth about $3 billion, and he has sold almost $1 billion of his stock. So last year, if you'd asked him how much his company was worth, he'd have told you $1 billion, and he would probably have been exaggerating. Today, he has a stake worth $3 billion and has made $1 billion in cash. So it can be quite lucrative.
Excellent. Thank you, David. So great to have this. I know we're limited in the time, so I want to make sure that we wrap up in time. So just to recap, you got a little bit of a deep dive in SPACs, and maybe this is brand new to you and it kind of flew over your head a little bit, but hopefully you got a little bit of a flavor of sort of what these classes look like. We talk about relevant topics that are important for today. Thank you so much, Melissa, for posting our LinkedIns. Feel free to link in to myself and to David if you'd like to stay in touch or want to know more about this topic. Look forward to keeping in touch with you. And I think really this speaks to the broader, as I said, the broader theme and thought and leadership that we have at Emory. So I'm specifically in finance. I'm passionate about buying businesses, helping people think about a transformative way about their career. You kind of got a little bit of a deep dive with that today. You learn about SPACs, but there are lots and lots of other ways, even if you have different dreams in marketing, or you want to be in supply chain, or maybe you want to be a pure entrepreneur, start something from scratch. I'm all about buying businesses. There are lots of different paths forward, and I think Karen gave a great overview of what that can look like. What I thought we wrap up with is a top 10. So David and I, when we teach our classes, every guest speaker that we have in the class, we always ask to do a top 10. And in the very last class, David and I do our top 10. So we actually have a bonus one here on, as 11. So I don't know if you can share the screen still. I don't see that here anymore. I just see people. Melissa.
Hey, Klaus, while you're doing that, I see online Rahul Wadwa. So let me just give him a quick shout out.
Yes,
so Rahul is
an
Emory grad, and is a great guy. And he was a teaching assistant in our course and did such a great job. And we were so impressed that I asked him if he would be interested in joining our firm, Navigation Capital, as an associate. So I'm pleased to report that as of January 1st of this year, Rahul is our newest minted associate at Navigation Capital. So Rahul, welcome. Rahul, thanks.
Yes, give him a hand, guys. It's great. Rahul's fantastic student. So Rahul, great to have you on. Thank you. He made this session happen. He helped us prepare for it. So thank you, Rahul. So I can't see it right here, but Melissa, were you able to pull up the top 10? Or whoever's in charge of the slides? I don't see it anymore here somehow on my screen, but can somebody give me the thumbs up if it's on the screen? The top 10?
You know,
Sure.
There we go.
Is that what you want, Klaus?
Yep, there's our top 10. All right, so let's start with the top 10. The KBDP top tips for success. We'll leave you with that. We'll do this quickly. We'll do a 2-minute run through. So David, you want to start?
Sure. Listen, like in everything else in life, relationships are everything. It's very straightforward. I mean, you heard it earlier today from the student. You know, having good relationships and lasting relationships are critical to your professional career, to your personal life. They're everything. Everything begins and ends with good relationships.
And hopefully, and let me just say one more sentence on that. So the critical thing there is, I think most people, especially when they come to MBA school, you're thinking about building a tool bag. Don't forget people around you. So don't only think about networking up, think about networking laterally and even downwards. So you want to know undergraduate students, because guess what? 5-10 years down the line, they're going to be the next generation of leaders as well, just like yourself. So do that. Smarts are overrated. Number 2, hard work underrated. Again, speaks for itself. I think a lot of people that end up being here, you're all smart. And so the only way to distinguish yourself is by hard work. And so absolutely do that to be successful. David, number 3.
Listen, at the end of the day, preparation, research are invaluable. Some of the most successful people that I have ever worked with are not necessarily the smartest people. They're not necessarily even the hardest working people. But one thing they do is that they are prepared and they do their research, do their homework. Very important.
And on that theme right here, time is by far your most valuable asset. Learn to say no. That's really the corollary of that. I think the most successful people have a sharp sense of where they're heading and they're focused. And so it's very easy to say yes to a lot of things, but be strategic about what you say yes to and what you say no to. Be very, very deliberate about that. I think it will really tremendously help you in your career. And trust me, David and I have done these things. I'm just thinking about it. When I was your age, I wasn't even thinking about these things. I probably have made every mistake there is to make here on this slide. So, all right, number 5.
Always ask questions before you speak. So this fact that we're doing with Betty Lou, we just brought on a gentleman by the name of Brian Grazer. He's on the board. He lives in California. He's a movie producer. Some of you may have heard of him or some of his movies like American Gangster or A Beautiful Mind or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. He's done many movies, won lots of awards. Splash, if you're a little bit older like I am, you might remember. And he wrote a great book, which I'm actually just finishing up right now, called Curiosity. And his logic is that so much of success in life, another good book I recommend for anyone, is about being curious. And how do you affect being curious? It's about asking questions. And asking good questions and being curious is really a hallmark of some of the most successful people. So one of the things we want to do in this list is just identify things as we look around people who have been successful, whatever they've been doing. It's asking questions before you speak, because when you hear from other people about themselves, their background, and what they're thinking, it helps you frame how you position what you're going to say.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of that, and the other trick is clearly to talk last. Always talk last. Because last you can first hear what everybody else has said. Learn to listen is close to that by asking questions. Learn to listen and truly engage. Try to understand what people are saying without your own view and perspective on that. I think is critical to being successful. Number 7, David.
Yeah, this one is very personal for me. Go mostly all in. I used to tell people go all in, but I did that and it didn't work out many years ago. So I say go mostly all in. Always think about the downside. Now we have keep your FU money, and I know some of you are thinking that FU means something else, but let me tell you what it does mean. If you're from China, you'll know that Fu is a Chinese character. Look it up in Wikipedia. And it means a blessing, a good fortune, effectively something that you've created for yourself. So Fu money is a blessing money for yourself to protect yourself in case something happens, either that's unacceptable to you in a certain circumstance, or is going to be important for you in the future. So go mostly all in, but not entirely all in. One of the most successful private equity investors, period, in Atlanta is a woman named Babette Hennigan, and she's spoken in her class for many, many years. And she tells a story using this exact lesson. And she says, this is particularly for women, that you don't ever want to be in a situation that you find unacceptable at work, professionally or otherwise. And so she says, always important to keep some money aside so that no matter what happens, you can always say no, because to whatever the circumstance is, if you don't like it, so you got to keep that extra money aside. And I think it is a valuable lesson. And you also learn something about Chinese characters, for those of you who don't know.
All right, number 8, life is a long game, win in the long run. This maybe nicely dovetails to the new year. Who's made some resolutions? Any resolutions in the room? Do you make resolutions? Do you write down your goals? Anybody write down their goals? Yes, yes, only one hand, 2 hands, people writing down their goals. So this is, you know, it's really the second bullet here. People overestimate what you can accomplish in the short run, but underestimate what they can do in the long run. And so having a clear mind as to where you're going in the long run can really drive success. And the most successful people do exactly that. So instead of always tackling your to-do list, even in the next week or in the next month, keep your broader goals in mind, things that are 5 years out. Where do you want to go and how are you going to accomplish that? And what they often say is when you wake up in the morning, who does that? I certainly do that. I have a little to-do list and you start tackling things. Before you start doing that, first work on your big goals. Try to put things in the perspective of those larger goals so you are going to be successful in the end. Number 9.
Precedents are essential. It says Sam Walton's story. So Sam Walton, were he alive today, would be the richest man in the world. By the way, even richer than Jeff Bezos, and after yesterday, even richer than Elon Musk. His wealth is so immense. Now it's separated amongst his family members, but his family members today, because he passed away, if you add up all their wealth, it's well over $200 billion. It's actually closer to $300 billion. And that was all his. So he built really the most valuable firm. And he would tell you, and if there's lots of stories about Sam Walton, but one thing he's known for, it's a good thing to keep in mind. He says, I never had an original idea in my life, not a single one. He said, all I did, and he used to have meetings every Saturday with his employees, is I'd go around and look at other businesses and see what they were doing and take the best aspect of them. The name of his company, Walmart, was because there was a firm called Kmart, which came into the town. It was across the street and was doing very well. And he said, the Mart name works. I can't use K because that would be plagiarism. My name is Walton, so I'm going to call it Walmart. So down to the name of his company, he took from someone else, and many aspects of that business. And it doesn't mean that there's no place for innovation. You can innovate, and he was very much an innovator. But what he did was he built on what was the best of others, and he took what was the best of others to apply it on his own. It's a very powerful and important story.
Excellent. Well, number 10 speaks for itself. Surround yourself with smart people. It's one of the reasons that I hang out with David. So very grateful for you to be here, David. He's a smart man. I've learned a tremendous amount from you. And you'll wrap up with 11, I guess. But thank you for being here, David, as always. So wrap up with number 11, please.
Well, I think everyone, if you're thinking of going to Emory, then you've already got number 10 done, because there are lots of smart people at Emory. So that one you can check off your list, but keep it in mind as you continue going further in your careers. And the last one is pay attention to details. The details are often what trip us up. And it's important to really, folks, to sweat a little bit about the small stuff. You know, people say don't sweat the small stuff. I agree with that. Keep the bigger picture in mind. But when you're talking about execution, getting things done, it's the details that mess you up. And so you got to make sure when you're executing that you focus on details.
Excellent. So with that, I want to thank you all. Please keep in touch. I look very much forward to seeing many of you here next year in my classes. It's always exciting. So great to see you all. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over, I think, to Melissa.
Yes, thank you, class. Thank you, David, so much. This was so informative and really helpful, especially your tips for a good life. I think those are applicable to almost everyone. So right now we are going to move on Here's a little overview of the things that are coming up. We're going to hear from an evening MBA student, and then we're going to do some breakout rooms that are specific to the programs that you may be considering. During that time, admissions will also be available in the main room. We'll come back to the main room after talking about the programs and hear about the Career Management Center and the services that they offer. I'll do a really quick little remarks about admissions, and then Dean Bryan's going to have a few remarks. And then the best part of the evening is our swoop-ins, where you'll get to hear from our current students about topics specific to things that you might have questions about or be thinking about. So with that, I'm going to welcome Courtney Odom to the Zoom floor. Courtney is, where are my notes about Courtney? Courtney is an evening student, and Courtney, I'm afraid I've lost my notes about you. So you're just gonna have to start talking.
Not a problem, not a problem. Well, thank you so much for everyone who helped put this together, and for everyone who's considering applying to the Goizeta program. Congrats on just even the consideration. That's an exciting step. So my name is Courtney Odman. As David Panton probably knows, Courtney is a boy's name in Jamaica. And so my mom still loved the name and wanted to still name me Courtney. So that is why there is the N-A-Y, but it's still pronounced Courtney. A little about me is that I was raised in Kingston, Jamaica, and then actually for high school, moved to Northern California. After high school, I attended George Washington University, where I thought I wanted to go into politics, but when you go to a school where everyone else wants to go into politics, it didn't end up to go that way. After my undergrad career, I actually decided to go straight into my Master's of Education program. So I went to University of Maryland, where I wanted to learn more about higher education. And that brought me to Emory. And so in, I think that was now 2014, I arrived at Emory, where I now work. And so I work in the Division of Campus Life, where I set the learning strategy for our department and oversee the training and development initiatives for residential staff. I've been considering the evening MBA program since arriving at Emory, and I finally decided in early 2020 to invest in myself. And I applied for the program, and I was so thankful to get in. I remember the application process, though very nerve-wracking, it was so intentional, and I'm very thankful for all of the admission staff. My reason for wanting to pursue an MBA came down to wanting to build my business acumen and to advance my career, and later possibly transition into human capital consulting or corporate HR. The program thus far has exceeded my expectations. I'm just a first year, so going into my second semester, but after my first semester, I have just loved every minute of it, even the midterms and the finals. I was nervous about balancing work and school and my personal life, but it's actually been easier than I had expected, as long as I was honest with my supervisor, and has actually helped me to leave work at an appropriate time. So I'm very thankful for the program to help me do that. I want to echo a lot of what Karen said earlier as it relates to clubs and what Goizeta offers, but I also wanted to share some of my other loves of the program. First is the intentionality. Everything is done with a purpose, and everything is centered around Goizeta's values. We even have a shirt that has Goizeta's values right on the back of them, so you can never forget them. And then the passionate and student-centered professors. I think you all got firsthand account of that today. They're just so knowledgeable and they're so approachable. You can honestly email them and say, hey, I'd love to ask a question about this homework assignment or something that you said in class, or maybe even something that I'm experiencing at work, and they're willing to hop on a Zoom, and hopefully once we get back into person, willing to meet in person for quick office hours. The next thing is the supportive and dedicated staff. So it's not just the professors, but it's also our career staff and our evening MBA staff. They're always there to help answer questions, and they've helped me personally and professionally. And then the next is the alumni. I mean, their willingness to just answer questions about classes, suggestions on the best classes to take, or thoughts on various careers that you should consider. Especially someone like myself who's just passionate about learning. I'm always considering, okay, but what are other things that I could learn? Or what are other areas that I could be utilize my skills in? And they've been incredibly helpful. The last thing is the cohort model. There are about 90 plus of us in my cohort, and I was really nervous that I wasn't going to get to know everyone. but we've already formed an incredibly strong bond. We were actually together when the decision for the recent election came out, and it was just really great to be around people that I'm in class with and doing life together with. Especially in the midst of returning to school during a global pandemic, it's been really helpful to have virtual study sessions, fantasy football leagues. I was #1 for so long until the very end, book clubs, Slack, and then safe in-person events. I've loved that I've been able to apply everything that I've learned in the classroom immediately to what I do in my job. And that's been the best part about doing the evening MBA program. Overall, this program has made me a better person and a better professional. And I'm excited that you all are considering to apply for one of Goizueta's great programs, and know that it can be a difficult decision, but it's worth the time, it's worth the investment. You won't regret it. And I'm saying that already in my first semester. So hopefully I'm saying that semesters to come. But no matter what the year or years ahead look like, I'm confident that Goizueta will continue to be intentional about meeting student needs and providing a business education experience that prepares principal leaders to have a positive influence on business and society, which is a Goizueta mission. And I have it right beside my desk on those tough days when I'm studying for classes or having those late nights. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to share a bit about my experience as an evening MBA student.
Thank you, Courtney. That was awesome. Great to